need for, and your peer group also requires that you see a real need, and that is how I think sustainable solutions are created that actually really add value in entrepreneurs' lives, because there are solutions dimes a dozen. But what if you had to sum it up, perhaps in one line, the USP for AdLunam, what would that be?
Definitely fundraising accelerator. We call
Okay.
it the zero to IDO accelerator. So we help with pretty much everything that you need to go from initial fundraising all the way up to launch, at least launch in the IDO aspect of the word, when the token launches, the TGE.
Right.
Then we also have the launchpad aspect of it, where we have an engage to earn platform with the proof of attention allocation model, but that's quite specific to retail investors, although it does also greatly support startups. Because what we essentially do through the platform, it's a gamified solution. So when people are engaging on the platform, projects are then able to identify who would be a good micro influencer, who would be a good ambassador, etc. And so then instead of the IDO itself being this black box where you have no idea who is investing in you, are they going to dump your tokens as soon as they can? It's then easier for projects to allocate their marketing spend to particular members of the community, as well as allowing these people also to invest, whitelisting them and ensuring that they get the investments because they are already invested in the project.
Brilliant, brilliant. I think you've kind of summed it up in a very effective manner, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs who are listening to this would be able to find a support. As I said, fundraising becomes like a full-time job when you do get into it, and then the product suffers, and you do need like a helping hand there that can support you in that endeavor and make sure that it doesn't become perhaps too tedious for them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would also point out here that I think if you've never done fundraising before, you might find that it's something that you naturally excel at. I don't think that's the experience that the average person has, because if you've not been exposed to this side of business before, or even this side of yourself, there's a lot of growing pains, there's a lot of learnings that need to take place. And it's very easy also to lose heart, because if you are constantly either hearing no, which actually is
Yeah.
easier than just being ignored, people are gonna get back to you, but they never do, or you send out outreach and then no one ever hears, or you never hear back from them. I mean, that is probably one of the worst experiences to have, because you know what you're building, you believe in what you're building, but it feels like you're standing in the void and there's no one there, and is anyone else still alive at this point? So I think it's
Yeah,
not a pleasant experience to go through. And what often
absolutely.
happens, and this is something of course that founders need to guard against, because it's easy to then not only start losing heart, but to also think, well, maybe I'm not the best person for the job, maybe I'm not
Yeah,
capable of doing this. And
yeah,
often the reason that this might even be true is because you simply don't understand what the best practices are in order to prepare for success. Now, on the
absolutely.
internet, there's a lot of information about how to approach investors, how to speak to VCs, how to pitch to them. I can promise you that the rules in Web3 are different enough from the traditional venture capital industry that you need to understand the nuances of how to work with, how to speak to, how to approach VCs in this space, because they look for very particular things. So again, you might not be having success, and that's not because you are the problem, which is easy for us to internalize, erroneously, but it's
Mm.
because you need a greater understanding, and often that comes from people, of course, who have done this before, or in our case, we do this all the time, and so we know what's very current in terms of what VCs are looking for.
Absolutely. I think what you said right now, I think that is something that will tug at the heart of a lot of entrepreneurs who are building, because it's easy, as you said, to internalize this, and you feel like perhaps you're not the right person building the solution. But at times, see, expertise is required, right? I think in every job, some kind of expertise does take you further from, say, you reach 0 to 1, but to really scale how do you move forward? And to do that, you do need a helping hand. That's why people, get the help of mentors and advisors. And what you are providing is actually very actionable, very tangible, and that will help entrepreneurs. And I've been an entrepreneur for nearly 13, 14 odd years. So I understand that what you're saying when you say that, okay, you might not be perhaps doing the right things to get the requisite results with vis-a-vis fundraising.
And also, just to add to that, I mean, if everyone cannot excel at everything, even if you are
Absolutely.
one of those people that you are naturally good at everything you do, as a founder, there's not enough hours in a day to be excellent at everything.
Uh,
What are the biggest wins for me on a long-term basis? So,
yeah.
for example, it's much more important to learn how to effectively manage a team, since as a
Mm.
founder, you will always be managing teams, than it is to become the the industry leading expert at fundraising if you are only going to need that for a few months at a time, a couple of times in your startup's lifespan. So it's also really important to discern, when do you personally need to improve your skills. I mean, of course, we always all should be improving ourselves, but then there's a difference between a skill that is going to serve you for several years or decades into the future versus a skill that perhaps it's easier to outsource to experts, in the
Yeah.
sense that by working with them, you will be improving your skill anyway, but you'll at the same time ensure that you'll get the delivery that you want, the results that you want, as opposed to trying to DIY everything and not being sure if there is going to be a positive outcome.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I can't concur more. I think this is very well put. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, as I said, would take heart that, you guys have so much clarity in what you are providing. You're actually adding tangible value to the journey of the entrepreneur who's basically out there trying to build their vision. So more power to you guys. Now, for AdLunam, what perhaps would be like the next big milestone for you guys?
So definitely our own launch of our token, something that
Hmm.
we looking forward to, but at the same time, it very much depends on the market itself. So
Yeah.
as a launchpad, of course, our business is to launch projects, and it has been an incredibly painful market for a lot of projects. I'd say most projects over the last 2 years. We were in touch with a good number of projects 2 years ago that 1 year ago had completely fallen off the map, and
Right.
fast forward another year and even those projects are no longer, so I've seen a lot of shifts in companies over this very difficult period that we've been in. Of course, it's difficult if you are not funded, it's difficult to keep on building. Everyone can't bootstrap in the same way. But so for us, we've been ready to do our own IDO for a really long time. Almost as soon as we launched, it was very, very ironic how the market turned extremely quickly. And we've been waiting with bated breath ever since. But at the same time, I think that this market that we've just come through has just been so good for us as a company. We've been able to build out an incredible network of partners that, yes, it would have been possible in a bull market, but there are so many things happening in a bull market that only when you have the time to really sit down, evaluate, why are you doing this? What do you need to do? And especially those key pivots, right? So for us as a company, definitely the IDO is one of our major next milestones. But then I would say on a daily basis, I mean, because we work with projects and they are all in varying stages of readiness. It always feels like there's some or other milestone happening on a daily basis. So it's quite fun. And then,
Hmm.
of course, another milestone that we also have coming up. I host the podcast, The Future of NFTs, and
Right.
we will be releasing. I will be publishing a book this year, The Future of NFTs, and then we are launching our collector's edition of the book at Token 2049 in Dubai in April. So very much looking forward to that. But yeah, I mean, being in this industry means there's always milestones around the corner, and that's what makes it very rewarding and very enriching to be here, either your own or the people that you care about and work with.
Absolutely. I think there is always something happening, and these are very exciting developments that you have going on for your podcast with the book. Can you, I'll talk about that a little bit as well, but can you tell us a little about the native token that you're talking about for AdLunam? Like, what would be the utility there, and when are you? As you mentioned, obviously the market conditions reign supreme there on deciding the timeline. But is there a timeline that you're looking at? For the IDO, and what would be the utility of the token?
So the token is Lunam, the Lunam token,
Hmm.
and the utility, of course, as a launchpad, typically how it works is,
Right.
let me use a little example, maybe that'll make it easier. So if I want to invest into, let's say, Project Cup, since I see a cup in front of me, very creative. So I wanna invest in Project Cup, and the only in the public sale. And the only way to do so is to go where the sale is taking place, of course. Now,
Right.
previously, that would happen on the project website itself. That was the ICO, or initial coin offering days. Thank goodness we've put that behind us, because that was really easy for people to get scammed and rug pulled. And
Yeah.
I mean, I
Absolutely.
saw this firsthand many times over, and had nightmares about how scary and unsafe this industry is. So we've evolved from that into an IDO, an initial DEX offering, which is what takes place on a Launchpad website. Now, the utility typically of a Launchpad website would be that in order for, let's say, Jane to invest into Project Cup, they would need to own Launchpad tokens, and then they would
Hmm.
stake those Launchpad tokens in order to get the allocation for Project Cup. So that's a typical way of how it works. We do have different types of engagements with our token. So we have the proof of attention allocation mechanism that functions slightly differently from staking the tokens. But I'll keep it high level for now. And then the other question in terms of when are we looking at launching? So I think this is
Hmm.
the question on everybody's lips, especially
Right.
those of us who have been watching the market like a hawk for several years now, wondering when that golden moment is going to arrive. So I think, and this is of course not financial advice, but I think predicting what might happen this year, I think that once the Bitcoin halving takes place, we are definitely going to see, because just based on historical trends and data, we will be seeing a rise in the Bitcoin price. And then once the Bitcoin price, which is already, I mean, it's already growing by the day. I haven't checked it today, but I know at some point yesterday it was, I think, 52. So
Hmm.
it's climbing quite rapidly. And then once that happens, once the market is like, okay, now is the time, of course, that's when the altcoin season then kicks off again. And that's when you'll see a lot of different projects launching. And so probably that would be the timeline for us as well, because our launch is very much dependent on how many projects are willing to launch on a continuous basis. So if we have
Right.
our IDO and then projects are still waiting to launch, there would have been no value for us, and of course, no liquidity for our token once we launch, which is why we've been holding out on that.
All right. Yeah, that is sensible. I think market conditions kind of do dictate, and it is again like having a token, managing the token becomes a
A
very big
full-time
part of
job.
what you're doing. Yeah, it becomes a full
Yeah.
time job, right? And when it's out there, it's out there. There is nothing. There's not much that you can control from your end. There are certain aspects, obviously, that are outside the ambit of your control, and timing it, I think, is everything. So, I am rooting for you guys. I've seen you work and Jason work for a long time. Jason, so I've been following for the longest time, and really, really excited for what you guys are building. And especially, all my wishes. I think, what you're building with the kind of clarity that you have, like I mentioned before, is going to be fabulous for upcoming entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who are just starting out.
Thank you. No, I think it's going to be an exciting time up ahead. The other reason why it's going to be exciting is previously Web3 was mostly populated by degens. And I
Hmm.
think in this bear market, in this bull market, of course, we saw that during the NFT hype of 2021, where a lot of new people came into the space. Um, But then, of course, we all know what happened. The bubble rose to the top, and then someone took a needle and prick, and then the whole thing fell flat. And
Yeah.
so, similar to how NFTs are now having to prove themselves beyond, PFPs and beyond art, I think what is happening in Web3 this cycle around is that there are so many traditional people, and I'm saying traditional in the sense they come from traditional industries, and that's every industry except Web3. They are not DJs, so they don't do things in the same way. They don't think in the same way. So I think what we are going to see this season is that everything is going to be different. Perhaps some things slightly different, perhaps other things very different. But I think we'll see a shift in how marketing and communications are done, in how projects work on delivery, because of course in the previous market that was the number one complaint. Projects get
Yeah, not
funded,
delivering.
and then
Yeah,
as
and
soon
then
as
not
they
doing
get
anything.
funded, that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of spoils the ecosystem for everybody, right? Like it obviously it tarnishes the image that people have of Web3 as it is, and then it kind of makes it a bad situation for even the entrepreneurs who are coming in perhaps with a good intention.
I think that's why it's so important to build your network in the industry, because
Yeah.
there are pockets within Web3, and whether you are working in Web3 or you are only investing in Web3, whether you are building in Web3, I mean, each of these categories have their own subset of pockets. But I think if you are able to move between them, I'm very fortunate to be able to do this. I speak all over the world. I mean, I meet many different people in the space. So I've grown to understand that there's so much more to this industry than just what the average person understands. If you look at the media, if you make assessments based on the media, you might get one impression of Web3. If you are on Twitter, you'll get another
Yeah.
impression. If you're on LinkedIn, you get a completely different impression. So I think it's important, if you are at all involved in this industry, to expand your network as much as possible. There are so many opportunities to meet new people. There are so many opportunities to get involved, more than any other industry that I've ever been in, and more than any other industry that anyone I've ever spoken to who is now in Web3 have been in previously. So I think we
Yeah.
have an incredible opportunity to build our own careers, to build our startups that we are working on, or if we simply want to invest, to make sound investment decisions, even though it's a high risk investment category, but to understand what are the important factors to look at when making these decisions. And I do think the space, yeah, I mean, of course, we're going to see the same FOMO, the same hype, the same greed that we always see. But at the same time, I think there's a foundational aspect of Web3 that is maturing. And a lot of this is because, as I said, people are coming into the industry wanting to use the technology, but not wanting to be a DJ, and not wanting to get involved with, the media hype. Let's put it that
Hmm.
way.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. So now, you mentioned about how, I mentioned your advocacy work and how you write and, you talk at all of these conferences, you talk about Web3 and, all of this, and you have extensive experience with that. And that kind of brings me to your podcast, which is around NFTs, right? And I would love to understand from you, what are the kind of trends and insights have you gained, and or observed basically in the NFT space, and how do you see it kind of evolving in the next few years?
Yeah, great question. I remember when we started the podcast, and I didn't quite understand the hype about NFTs. I'm not someone
Yeah.
who collects NFT art. I'm not interested in PFPs, but that was the dominant conversation that everyone was having. And
Hmm.
I wanted to gain a deeper understanding, because the technological aspect of things, I understood that this is something, but I wanted to understand, why is it something? And the
Hmm.
best way for me to learn is always to speak to other people. It's something that comes very naturally to me. And of
Right.
course, during the bear market, we had this amazing opportunity to focus on more educational content. I think that's what a lot of companies, or at least a lot of companies that want to do things the right way, that's what they did. Because during the bear market, there's not much else to do other than to understand the reason there's a bear market is because there's nothing much for people to incentivize people to stay, right? If they are only there for the money and there's no
Yeah.
money, yes, they'll leave. And so during the course of hosting the show, we are now on season 3. I think we are coming up to 50 episodes next week. What I've learned over this entire period is that if you think of NFTs as art or PFPs, you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, it's
Yeah.
early days. I think that there's going to be a lot that needs to be done, because a lot of people still have this perception, and probably, I mean, we are not going to use the term NFTs. I mean, what does it mean? If I use the term NFT, if someone's heard it before, it's probably because they know, oh, NFTs were sold for millions of dollars and now they're worth nothing.
Hmm.
If I talk about a digital collectible, I don't think that's necessarily the term that we use, because not all NFT utilities are digital collectibles. It's a type of utility.
Right.
And then, for the average person, if they want to learn a little bit more, and I say, okay, it's not an NFT, it's actually a non-fungible token. I mean, what does that mean? So I do think that in future we are not going to see the NFTs in the same way that we do now. The underlying technology like blockchain is probably going to be quite hidden. And
Hmm.
this is probably the key takeaway that I have personally from speaking to all of these incredible minds building these incredible solutions. I'm saying incredible solutions, but it will in many cases take years for those kind of solutions to hit mass adoption. So at this point, and this is what I can say about the state of NFTs right now, we are in a period of possibility. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of people working on really cool ideas, but whether
Yeah.
those ideas will get adopted, I think very much has to do with how much you need to understand Web3 or NFTs. If we look at Starbucks, if we look at Nike, I mean, there's a lot of big brands actually over the last, let's say, 2 years or so in the bear market that have started using NFTs, and they've done it with success. I mean, Reddit had their avatars coming out, but you'll notice that they didn't focus on the Web3 aspect, on the NFT aspect, because if you work in this industry, this stuff is cool to you. You want to tell everyone about it. You want to use these terms. It's cool. I mean, my show is called The Future of NFTs. What am I going to do if we no longer call it NFTs? But I think that really is the secret to NFT's eventual success, is that we stop focusing on the technical aspects of it, because most people don't understand it and they don't care. They just want something cool that works. And if they need to learn about Web3 and they need to learn about NFTs, then it's always going to be like this weird thing that we do here in the corner, and the average person, won't get involved. So that's what I see for the next few years, is that NFTs are here to stay, but they'll probably become more and more invisible. And that's really cool. I look forward to that point. I'll have to change the name of the show, but but I'm not sure what to yet, so I've got time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an ever-evolving space, and especially with NFTs, what you said, I think I was right there on the same boat. I did not understand the craze. I did not understand why like I understood on some level why cryptocurrencies and all of this was becoming big, earlier, but I couldn't see like a proper use case. And obviously that has changed drastically. There are so many use cases now for NFTs, and there are so many builders that are working, like you mentioned, it still stands to be tested whether all of these solutions will actually make a mark. But there are so many solutions that are being built around this technology, which makes it very, very exciting.
And I think, just to highlight here, I think for most people, especially when these things are quite complex to understand, one of the most helpful things that you can do for yourself is to actually go on. So for example, our podcast, it happens live on Twitter Spaces every week, and then subsequently it's available as a podcast. So I would highly recommend that, even if you're not really someone who uses Twitter, LinkedIn also does the same thing, although it's not as active on LinkedIn. But there's a lot of opportunities where you can actually tune in live or record it if it's a pre-recorded podcast like this one that we're on. There's so many resources that you can get involved, either just from an audience, like just passively listening, or even ask questions, contribute to the conversation, because it's easy to get in the same room as people that are building things in this space. And I always tell people that I'm so, so fortunate, because the lens through which I look at the world and I look at the future is very much colored by the fact that I am constantly speaking to startups in really early stages.